Hey everyone, Adrian here. Welcome to the Conversations with Adrian podcast. Today I'm joined by Stefanos Sifandos. Did I say that right?
You did.
There you go. Good Aussie name.
Very.
Mate, thanks for joining me. I've been really admiring your work on Instagram mainly. I've seen a number of your posts. I've been following you for a ways, and the reason why you've caught my interest is you're an Aussie guy and you're living abroad. And then also you're talking about a really interesting topic that I've always found fascinating, which is relationships and obviously the kind of duality, I guess, between masculine and feminine energy and all the do's and don'ts in relationships. So I guess without further ado, I'd love to hear your backstory on sort of how you come to this point. Can you share that with me?
Yeah, of course. I'll share parts of it, and obviously we can roll from there.
Sure.
For me, man, I think like most of us in life, we not all of us, but most of us, I suppose, depending on our dharma, depending on how we've come into this world, we often experience deep transformation through intense or immense pain, and that was me. Right, it's like I had to learn the quote unquote hard way. I had to grow through hardship and challenges and difficulties, and what made it, or what compounded those difficulties and those challenges, was my inability at the time and my unwillingness to look at my stuff, to examine my patterns, to look at why I kept falling on my face, why I kept having very similar experiences but with different people, not acknowledging my role in that equation and dynamic, really not addressing the abuse and the traumas that I experience. And not everyone experiences abuse, not everyone experiences chronic or acute trauma. However, many of us do experience trauma, and there's big T trauma and little t trauma, and trauma resides on a spectrum, and anything that throws us off our equilibrium and dysregulates our nervous system, which is essentially life and the experiences that we have,
Mhm.
it can cause schisms in the way that we see the world, and they compound over and over again, and they form our adult behaviors. But the coping strategies that we used when we were younger, which is, for me, it was hiding, it was intense negative self-talk, it was as a teenager and an adult, aggressiveness, volatility, which I was replicating essentially what I experienced as a young person, as a child, violence and volatility, right? So my coping strategies were to attack people, were intellectually, emotionally, physically attack people. So I would feel safe in my ego. I would feel safe, that little boy inside that never got a chance to speak, never got a chance to be seen, he would feel safe. And as I became a man and started developing more power and developed a greater connection to my body, I started utilizing that in a way that was forceful and oppressive and disconnected from my own self. That doesn't mean that I was looking for trouble, but I was, like there was a part of me that just wanted to be violent because I felt so repressed as a little kid, right? And so that combined with also wanting to help people and wanting to be of service, right? Because as a little kid, I was really shy. I was really withdrawn. I would observe the world. I was very intuitive, but that was beaten out of me. And I couldn't really express that, but it was still a deep yearning to be of service, to connect to people and understand people. And I know that there are many men that can share that. And, we develop armor along the way. Like I explained and shared what some of mine was, right? Some of it was even manipulation, lying, dishonesty, cheating, feeding the ego in different ways. Infidelity, sex addiction, sex compulsion, adrenaline seeking, just so much to get me out of my pain. So the bigger the pain, the greater the pleasure we require. And that's what I sought. I sought peak experiences.
Mhm.
And so over many years, that transpiring, I'm 39 now, in my very early 30s. I was in a relationship, and she found out that I was cheating in that relationship, and it really brought up a lot of shame and a lot of what I was not looking at to the surface of my awareness. And in those moments, I made a decision. It took me a couple of weeks actually, but I made a decision to not go back, no matter what, to not go back to how I was being, and to really look at all areas of my life, because I felt like I was quote unquote failing in all areas of my life. I was spinning my wheels. I was in debt. Businesses weren't working. Friendships were solid. That was probably the only thing that was working in my life, that and my health.
Mhm.
But relationships weren't. Relationships weren't. And the extension and expression of the core of who I was being represented in debt and burn build mentality with how I was making money, because I was so volatile within myself. So my external environment was volatile, particularly in my relationships, because my relationship to self was volatile.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really began a journey for me. That was a massive catalyst. Unfortunately, I hurt people along the way and hurt myself. And that was a massive catalyst for the deep transformation that I experienced and continue to experience. But the commitment that I made to myself, I didn't give myself a choice to go back to that old self. I gave myself 3 options. I'm moving in a different direction. I either commit suicide because it's too overwhelming, I end up in a mental asylum, or I move through this and I'm at the very least able to grow from it myself. And as a bonus, maybe continue to teach and help others on their journey. Now, I'd been doing this for years. I've been in this space in the personal development industry since I was 18 years of age. So the teaching part wasn't new for me. It wasn't like I just had a career change. Just I wasn't as effective because I was out of integrity. So I made my focus to be in integrity, and that came with ego death and losing friendships and loss of identity in many different ways and feeling lost and suicidal, and there was a lot there over those years.
Wow. It's pretty powerful. I can relate to a lot of that. I think there's a kind of evolution, I guess, that you kind of go through that. I think it's Wayne Dyer. He talks about like the morning of your life and the afternoon of your life, where you sort of go through this accumulation phase. You want to build things, you want to accumulate stuff, and then you head to a period in your life where it's the afternoon of your life. You have little or I guess less gravitation towards material possessions, and you grow more towards a spiritual growth, developing as a human being and things like that. But there's a lot of chaos along the way, I think, for a lot of people that eventually move to that area. And I guess that's one of the things that I really want to hear from you, is that you've kind of recognized some of the trauma that's happened in your life and some of your toxic patterns that are going on, that I feel personally that most people don't want to acknowledge. Whether I believe most people would be conscious of it, but I don't think they really want to acknowledge that toxicity or that trauma that's happened in their life is affecting most things that are happening in their day-to-day lives. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I would also say that it's a yes and scenario, right? And so we often get to a point where we ignore where we're at. I would say the majority of people are unknowingly moving through the world. They're unconscious to their own pain, to their own fears, to what they're repressing and they're numbing. And it's evident by how we behave, the excess that we search for. Myself included, I'm not exempt from that in any capacity. The numbing through TV, through food, through excessive exercise, through anything in extremes, drugs, alcohol, status seeking, more money, more fame, more experiences, more adrenaline, like more of everything. And so there's nothing wrong with those things. There's nothing wrong with sex. There's nothing wrong with food. There's nothing wrong with watching a documentary or a movie or a TV show that you enjoy. There's nothing wrong with these things. What happens is that they often become a crux for us, and we utilize them, we leverage them to avoid something that we're feeling that's very uncomfortable, because we don't want to feel uncomfortable. We live in a society of short-term, quick fix gratification. We live in a society of avoidance of pain. We're pleasure-seeking, hedonistic beings. And as a result of that, not only the societal measures by which we live by, but also our internal family dynamics. We have children raising children. What I mean is we have adults, but they're still stuck in their childhood selves, right? They're still wounded. They're projecting their pain unconsciously and consciously onto their children. And so they're stuck in this time warp. Then we become stuck in this time warp. And we spend most of our lives in avoidance of feeling what needs to be felt to regulate our physiology to then move beyond that trauma. But we're so attached and addicted, not to the trauma, not to the wreaking of havoc or the chaos that we produce in our lives. We're not addicted to the drama. What we're addicted to is the protective mechanisms, the protective self that comes out when we're in chaos, because it's that protective self that helps us feel safe. For example, for me, if I ever felt threatened, I would fight. The moment I felt threatened, I would argue, I would be argumentative, and I would escalate that, because my argumentative self protected that little boy inside that felt unsafe and unstable, that felt he couldn't help himself, that he couldn't protect himself. So when my protector came out, the aggressiveness, the loudness, the bigness, I felt safe. And we become addicted to that protector because that helps us feel safe. And our bodies yearn to be in homeostasis. They yearn to be in regulation. Now there's a confusion because we think we're safe, but yes, we are. And we're perpetuating a paradigm that's not sustainable, because in that process, we're also dumping massive amounts of cortisol, massive amounts of adrenaline. That over time becomes our low-level state of functioning, which causes then illness and dis-ease in the body. Because not that cortisol and adrenaline is bad, it's very useful for many different reasons, but we're in it in excess because of our psycho-emotional, psychosocial paradigms that we move in, because we're essentially unhealed. We're operating from shadow aspects of self. We're operating from pain and fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you stay in that state, or you're constantly cycling in and out of it, you're at a toxic level, I guess, of those hormones that are excreting from your body. So yeah, I totally get it. For me, my go-to emotion was anger and even rage. You know, like it'll get to the point where throwing shit around and chucking tantrums and saying not nice things. So it definitely can arise in you things that, again, I agree with you. You feel safe in that area, feel protected. But again, it's just like a band-aid approach to the real trauma that's underneath. And I guess when that never heals, it's it's something that just kind of festers like a cancer, I guess, inside of you. For me, my experience, Steph, was through COVID. Now, one of the most exposing things about COVID was the holes in my relationship, and also exposing the unhealed portions of me that were arising. So there was just an immense amount of stress and pressure, and there was all sorts of things going on in terms of business and family and all the rest of it. But it kind of exposed the things that I've been ignoring, like you said earlier, for quite a long time. So for me, I've been recently separated for just gone a year, and the process leading up to that was quite traumatic, and a lot of healing had to take place to sort of get to the point of leaving. And then there was another process involved in order to heal to the point where I could feel in tune with my body again, with the things that were coming up, releasing emotions and acknowledging them. And one of the things that I wanted to chat with you about is kind of facing, like you just mentioned before, shadows and things like that. I guess people might align with demons or the dark side, or a negative side of them, or a toxic trait. And I guess for me, it was kind of like staring those things in the face and I guess integrating myself with them, not wanting to avoid them, but kind of exposing them for what they are, and then trying to take away, I guess, the negative charge is what I'm trying to say, or an identity towards it. I was wondering if you could speak to that, because it's certainly something that is reoccurring in my life, and the lesson is just constant. But I feel that within my conversations with others, with my clients, with the people that I just talk to in general, this is a common thing. You can hear it in their voice, you can see it in their words, and you can see the patterns of existence within that. So maybe you can talk to that for me.
Yeah, brother, breakups are, they have been for me personally as well, and so many of the clients that I work with. Breakups are one of those things that reveal the deepest parts of ourselves, the parts that we are unable to see. Intimate relationships really shine a light on the dark parts of ourselves. And I don't mean the bad parts of ourselves, just the parts that are unseen to us. And intimate relationships, and I really align with this. I learned this from Harville Hendricks. And for me, intimate relationships, and I sat with this for many, many years, they represent a deeper part of ourselves that we are unable to touch, but also that is unfulfilled and fulfilled at the same time. And so what I mean by that is intimacy and romantic partnerships and sexuality, often those types of relationships often represent what we did and did not receive both consciously and unconsciously from our primary caregivers. And we spend our adult lives attempting to fill a void, but not only attempting to fill a void, attempting to heal a part of ourselves, of our psyche that feels damaged, where we perceive ourselves to be fractured. And so often what happens is we don't learn the lessons. We create these redo scenarios and situations in our lives in order to have a redo. So, for example, if you have a strained relationship with your mother and there's enmeshment there, and as a result of enmeshment, which is your mother emotionally, unconsciously projecting her needs onto you and using you as a substitute or surrogate husband, and that happens in unconscious ways, you may become very needy, or you may become codependent or insecure as an adult. If you have relationship after relationship where you're attracting, for example, avoidant partners where you need the intimacy, you need the closeness, the clinginess, the neediness, and they're like, whoa, I need my freedom. And you're not learning, quote unquote, the lesson or the teaching to heal that part of you, to move into a greater sense of wholeness. And you just keep repeating that and you're breaking up from relationships. There's going to be this emptiness that you feel. And in feeling that emptiness, you're then going to want to seek more of it. And so often what happens is the intensity of the similarity of the situations that you attract in relationship are not only the same, but they're amplified. Now, the difficulty with that is the more amplified they are, the more challenging it is to do the work to heal that part of you. Hence why for me, I dragged it out, and it took me so long to get to that point. I could have learned that 10 years earlier. The pain wasn't enough for me to actually go, wow, I need to change. Right? I need to actually shift this. I can't keep it going. The numbing's just becoming too difficult, like way too difficult. And so often you'll feel a loss, you'll feel an emptiness within. And what we want to do is we want to seek something outside of us, sex, a relationship, something, whatever it may be, food, something to help us feel good that's outside of us to fill that void. If we can pause, slow it down, and be with our pain. I'm not saying be a sadist. I'm not saying, thrive in your pain. I'm saying if that's what's presenting, be in that. Welcome that as you would welcome winning $100 million in the lotto, or as you would welcome, a puppy delivered to your door. Whatever it may be, like welcome that emotion and that state, because there's something revealing itself in that. There's something for you in that. But we often don't spend enough time with it because it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah, 100%. A process for me that has really helped is acknowledging the emotion for what it is, accepting it for what it is, and just allowing it to be here. But then really identifying like whereabouts in my body do I feel that emotion? And then trying to go into that emotion and dissolve it to a point where I feel that there's no longer a negative charge. So I might feel pain or tightness or a numb or a dull ache or something like that. So I think to get really in tune with your body and how it feels and how it responds has been an interesting process for me. In meditation, I've spent so many mornings down the beach in meditation, really going through a lot of the emotions that I'd be feeling in that moment. And the amount of tears that would come up in that process was just like to the point of sobbing, right? And I'm not an unemotional guy. I am quite emotional. I can get quite teary at a lot of things. Things get me in the heart pretty much straight away. So, but the experience though of upheaving those emotions and just like going through it and going through that process, I think was quite a liberating experience for me. I felt like a part of I felt like these little mini deaths were going on in terms of my ego. So, and my attachment to people, places, material possessions, things, experiences, and an idea of an identity that I thought I was. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've noticed within myself is a dance between understanding who I am and what I represent, my values, my core messaging, my I guess, my belief systems. And then when those are in conflict with someone else, especially in a relationship, I had a habit, and I still have to work on this, of modifying my behavior to please what that person would want to see within me, as opposed to staying within myself. Am I making any sense here?
You are absolutely are. And my question to you would be, well, firstly, before I ask you that question, I want to really resonate with what you're saying. And that somatic release is so important for closing the loop on trauma, because the trauma is not so much the experience that happens, it's more how we interpret the experience, and how the nervous system and the mind and the interaction between those two yet one entities interpret that. And so when you release somatically, when you sob, when you move, when you sound, and you start moving that energy that was once trapped at the point of infliction, you do start to heal. You start to create spaciousness in your body, psychologically and physiologically. And the question I would have for you is, where do you feel you learned that behavior where you had to prioritize others over yourself?
Yeah. Such a great question to meditate on. And I really am surprised at how far back my memory goes to an identity, or how I labeled a certain situation, circumstance, or events. I mean, I've had memories that have popped up from when I was less than 2 years of age, of things that I've witnessed with my mum and dad, and all that kind of stuff. So it's just mind-boggling as to just how many files are in this fucking brain of mine that kind of keep coming back. It's unbelievable. So I think that kind of process is quite confronting. And for me, I guess my philosophy or idea of getting back into being single and kind of putting myself out there has taken the better part of a couple of years, to be honest with you, Steph. Like I've got 3 children, so I want to protect them through that process as well. And there's a couple, the separation has its own ups and downs, as you would know. So and then I didn't really want to enter back into like the wild, wild west until I felt that I was ready. I just don't feel like it was. I think I'll be doing myself a disservice to carry in any sort of toxicity or any kind of self-sabotaging habits or belief systems into a new relationship. I felt like I was just going to repeat old habits, and my marriage was of 20 years, so it's not like I really wanted to get back into like another marriage straight away, or heal that side of me, like you said, seek something external to replace that void that I was feeling. I kind of wanted to work with that void as much as possible to get myself to a position where I felt that it was time. I hope that's sounding okay.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I get this question often, that can you keep healing in relationship, or can you heal in relationship, or can you do your inner work when you're in relationship, or do you need to be by yourself, right? And it's a question that's often asked, not just of me, but of other people as well. And for me, it's one of those things that's yes, and you can definitely heal in relationship. Your relationship can be a fertile ground for healing and growth and expansion and challenges that help you become a grander version of yourself. And sometimes you're at a level in your life where a relationship is a distraction, and that's a problem, right? And so when a relationship is a distraction, then you're not doing the healing, and you're using the relationship as an excuse to not do your work. And sometimes I had to spend time by myself, ample time as a single person, because I had core wounds I had to deal with, that not only would the relationship have been a distraction, I would have hurt that relationship. In fact, I did for many years, over a few different relationships, because I wasn't at a point where I could be honest and clear and open-hearted. I was hiding and in shame. I had so much trauma and abuse that I hadn't dealt with, that I was unconsciously vomiting that into the relationship. So when I met my now wife, I'd done such ample healing on myself. And don't get me wrong, this journey's been immense as well, healing for both of us. Like we've run into challenges. However, our ability to deal with them has been so different to any relationship previous to that, because of the awareness that we have and the experiences that we've had, the tolerances and the resilience that we've cultivated. So you have to spend time you have to spend time by yourself when when you are in that process. And then there's a time that we will know if we tap in, if we just pause long enough and slow it down, we'll know, yes, I can be in a relationship. You'll know whether it's coming from insecurity and the need to be with someone that's not really coming from a healthy place, or it's coming from, oh, I'm ready to share my life and grow to the next level now. And I'm aware that there will be challenges in this relationship, yet I've done enough work to be aware enough to own my shit when it comes up.
Yeah, such a good point. I feel that when you are in that space, you start to kind of energetically align yourself with like energies and the people that I guess come in and you feel like there is an attraction. You can identify with why that is or where your motivations lie. And I think for me personally, it was just a decision, I guess, to say, hey, this is something that I've acknowledged now that I can see within someone else that is like a really nice soul connection, and that real nice dance between sort of masculine and feminine energy, that polarity, that really sexy sort of tug of war of energy, which is great. And then when you know that it's not there, it's the decision that it's just not there. So there's no point in moving forward if it's not present. So I feel that awareness, and you've said that word heaps of times, it's like the awareness of that, it puts you in a position where you now start to align with energies that are suitable for you. And I think that healing process from there on could be really exciting.
Most definitely. And then, once you've done a very specific amount of healing on yourself, and it's not something that can be quantified, and the growth journey, I believe, for all of us is never ending. Like if we're alive, if our hearts are beating, our eyes are open, we're having new experiences, we're intrigued by life, we have a curious existential understanding of who we are, then there's always work to be done, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing. And I'm definitely an advocate of creating space and having fun and lots of play. That's for many of us, that's part of our work. Like for me, it was being able to have more play and more fun because that was taken from me as a child. And so I was very serious. And so part of my healing journey is to have more play and have more fun and not be so serious and just take it a little easier in my life and my demeanor and my expression, all those things, right? And there's a time to do the work. And all of that is welcome, and all of that's a beautiful thing. And you can be in the dance of both of those things when you're in relationship and out of relationship. And the masculine and feminine and the expressive of that polarity and that dance is really secondary to the human quality of being first. And that what I mean by that is that often the lack of polarity or the distortion in polarity that we have in our intimate sexual relationships and our romantic partnerships are really more a result of unresolved trauma and childhood wounding. And they present as, oh, you need to be more masculine, or you need to adjust this in your femininity, or if you expressed in this way, that yes, it may make a difference, but it won't be sustainable because the core of the affliction of the pattern is vested in unresolved pain and fear.
Agreed. I want to maybe switch the conversation. There's so many things I want to talk to you about, but I think like we'll be here for probably 2 hours. So I'm mindful of your time. I think that it'd be nice to talk to the masculine and feminine energy. I want to hear your perspective. What I found really challenging with masculine and feminine energy as someone who, what you said before, like I feel like my values are similar to yours in terms of wanting to play more. Never wanted to grow up and relive my youth as much as possible. I feel like there's a lot of your youth wasted in dreaming about the future, and then you miss out on the present. So, but also I'm quite intense in terms of my business and my viewpoints and my stand on the world and all that kind of stuff. This podcast. So there's kind of a real balance for me where I need to be playing off between one and the other, because raising children, having a business, staff, all this kind of stuff, there's enough things to be serious about. So I really want to have some nice playfulness outside of that. But this whole dance between masculine and feminine energy, I've just found that there's this movement of women that are wanting to be dominant in the workforce. And again, I want to preface this, but I don't have any problem with it as such. But I feel like the masculine traits that a lot of my observation is the masculine traits that a lot of women complain about is the same masculine traits that they kind of celebrate within, especially a business community and things like that. I'm not sure if I'm making sense, but I just wanted to talk to that because I feel like there's a part of me that is quite feminine and in energy and like the emotional side of things, the intuitiveness, the kind of empathic side of me is definitely something that you could say is more feminine, but then there is quite a masculine energy there as well. I feel like sometimes in my life it's been suffocated one way or the other, particularly edging towards the feminine side. So that's been a healing journey for me as well. But maybe you can, I don't know, touch on a few of those points that I've just raised. Maybe you can express from your perspective as a coach.
Sure. So what we refer to as, masculine feminine dynamics or masculine feminine characteristics or masculine feminine polarity are essentially qualities or characteristics at one level, right? At another level, they're more than that. But really what we're doing is we're learning through contrast. And there's a deep richness that occurs in learning when we create a duality, because we now have comparison, and it helps create greater order in our minds. And order can be considered a masculine construct, and disorder can be considered a feminine construct. Mm-hmm. To be very clear, none of these are better or worse. We need both, right? Michaela Boehm speaks to the use of different language, and that is, instead of using masculine and feminine language, we would use doing energy and go energy. Yep. Doing energy and do energy and be energy, go energy and flow energy, active energy and passive energy, right? And that way we're oscillating. Now, so when we look at business and the examples that you gave, in order to get things done, have goal accomplishment, goal orientation, objectives reached, that is directional energy, and that is a masculine energy. And when we're talking about goal orientation, we're talking about creating success or outcomes in the world, that is masculine driven. And so much of the business world and governments and so forth, that level of structure and order, again, masculine energetics or go energetics or doing energy, much of that is masculine. And so we get valued for how much we do, our productivity. That's a big collective value. Like the more you do, the better human you are. The more you have, the more you've reached that epitome of being a great human being or accomplished or successful or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. And so that doesn't go beyond, that's not limited to men. That's across all of humanity, so to speak. And so women get caught in that game as well. And it's a game that we just prioritize. Like we prioritize money over so many other value sets. It's very evident. We look at big pharma, we look at big oil, just as an example. Yep. But you look at the sacrifices that are made to increase their quarterly profits and to have a greater return to their shareholders every quarter. And, like environmental degradation, human health, two very broad but very simple and pretty clear examples, right? And so the risk that we take in order to prioritize one set of values over others is very evident. And in masculine feminine dynamics is we prioritize the masculine and we deify it, and we often demonize feminine qualities, especially in men, because there's an association between masculinity and men. It's pure. Masculine and men, it's just purely in men. That's not the case. Masculine and feminine energies or contrasted energies exist within both of us, and we need both. And something that let me say it this way. So feminine is chaos, masculine is order. Feminine is movement, masculine is stillness, right? And so this is going to be a little philosophical, but bear with me here, because there's a translation into everyday movement and being. So both the masculine and the feminine are needed. In order to know self in the feminine context, the contrast of the masculine is necessary, and vice versa. You can't know one without the other. The feminine is wild, unpredictable, ever curious. Like the feminine's ever moving, ever changing, and deeply connected to the present moment. The feminine, in say the purity of her expression, yearns to shift, oscillate, and wander through the world, right? Her mind is also wandering and wondering, this or that, that or this, right? Like it's this need to explore everything, pulled in different directions, appearing not settled or grounded, but that's not necessarily the case. It is more oscillation between sensory experiences that inspires the feminine aspect of self to seek variety and beauty in all that is. So without that, we wouldn't have creativity. The amazing structures, innovations that have been created in the world wouldn't exist without the feminine in that sense, right? To inspire those ideas within. And then the action, the doing of that, the execution of that is inspired by the masculine. So without the chaos, there can be no order. Now, if the masculine is order, a big part of the masculine is order, then without chaos, the masculine has no role or even existence. For what is order without the reference point of apparent disorder? So the feminine is not disordered, but rather in movement. Stillness, masculine, can only be realized and appreciated through the energetic of movement, because you have a reference point for what is still. So we need each other more than we think we know. And we also must understand that these energetics and these attractions to certain expressions are fundamental or fundamentally human qualities first. We create polarity and we create contrast in order to grow and understand with greater efficacy. And that's what I said earlier. So chaos can also represent the feminine testing the masculine, wanting to know the masculine can show up in stability, consistency, safety, right? So imagine for a moment that what this opens up within the masculine is something quite profound. This level of discipline that's required, love, like self-love, self-awareness, the attention required to not react and feel threatened. Like the level of growth and healing that is felt from this place can be so powerful for the masculine and deeply healing for the feminine. So again, the feminine is like the water that flows between the two banks of like the solid rocks, like the berms, like which is the masculine, that hold the container for transmission, flow, energy, and movement. So we need directional flow, and we need a container to direct that flow. One is not better than the other. The masculine can also envision the innovation, and the feminine thrives in the creativity of that innovation. And the application is then executed by the masculine. Both the masculine and the feminine dream together. So the masculine thriving in expanding and the feminine grounded in the sensory now, like very earthy. So that for me is, like I said, it was going to be very philosophical, but that also you can start to pull from that, like how you function in the world as an individual. Because in certain areas of your life, you may be very quote unquote masculine. In other areas, you may be very feminine. And sometimes we behave in certain ways, not because it's natural to us or where we want to be, but because it's coming from wounding. And so we get to figure out what that is for us. And so we look at patterns. Like if life isn't working for us, if we're really struggling, then that shows us that maybe we're not doing something that's really in alignment with who we truly are here.
Yep, agreed. It's interesting also to hear your words and observe some of the patterns in my own life in terms of where in what environment I express more masculinity and femininity in terms of energy. So it also would arise some patterns in terms of particularly men or maybe even women as well that would lose themselves in, say, for example, their work when they feel like they can exert more of that masculine energy or that decisiveness and decision-making process, all that kind of stuff moving forward, I guess. And then there's a part of that creativity and that connection and love and everything else that's might be happening more at home or a need more at home. So again, a lot of what you're saying there still circles back to filling a void externally, and I guess going within and kind of acknowledging where those holes are in your armor, and then trying to fill that internally heal that as far as trauma is concerned. So I think that's profound what you just said. I haven't heard it explained that way before, and I think that was great. In wrapping up, I've ventured out into the big bad world of online dating. I've got to be honest, it scares the fucking life out of me. It was really interesting to get on. My experience hasn't been positive. I've been looking at interesting platforms and profiles. It's just the wording, for example. I can look at patterns and recognize certain words within people's profiles, which kind of spell disaster to me. It's purely a judgment, but there's a lot that's happening within that little bio. Unfortunately, I'm seeing profile pics with masks on these days, which is just a sad depiction of the times. I don't know how anyone can get a date with half their face missing, but I wanted to maybe get your idea on online dating. It seems like that's it's a way of life at the moment, and I've been sort of out of the loop for a while, so it's an interesting observation for me. So what are your, I don't know, helpful tips and hints on the online dating world?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, there are a lot of complications with the online dating world because of they mess with our evolutionary sexual mating strategies and sexual adaptations and how we actually connect and share intimacy with each other. And so, you have to go into online dating with really clear guidelines for yourself and really clear agreements with yourself, because there's a lot of insecurity out there. There's people putting profiles up that are deeply insecure. Some know it, some don't, most don't. And so they're exaggerating or they're not truly being themselves. It's another opportunity to wear masks. And it's really easy to hide behind a computer screen and behind not a fake profile, although those exist, of course, massively, but also to hide behind a distorted profile, one that's not completely true and honest. So you need to have agreements. And so for me, if you're doing online dating, be super clear and honest with what you want, with who you are. Represent yourself in contemporary times, like who you are now in terms of imagery and your truth, your expressive written word, right? And really make it. And if you want casual sex, if you want one night stands, I'm not insinuating that's what you want, Adrian, but if that's who you are, cool, just own it and be really clear and be very diligent with which platforms you're on, which dating apps you're on, because, some hold different purposes, so to speak, right? Some are more for friendship, platonic friendship. Some are more for, hookup culture. Some are more for long-term relationships. Just get really clear on what you want and transition the communication off the app as quickly as you can, either meeting in person or at the very minimum a video call to get a feel for this person and meet in physical presence as quickly as you can. Like as quickly as you can. If you feel something there and you want to explore that friendship, that intimacy, whatever it may be, meet that person as quick as you can. And again, not in a forceful way, not in a desperate way, but if that's your agreement and again, like if you don't want to waste your time, do a video call, get a feel for them first and then say, okay, cool. This video call was great. Conversation flowed, similar interests. There was a vibe there. She's a good looking woman. There's some sexual chemistry there, want to meet her, and then be active in organizing that. And if someone isn't meeting your agreements and your non-negotiables in dating, leave it, move on. And if you can't leave it, if you're, attached to it, awesome. There's just some work for you to do around that.
Interesting. It's, I think obviously, look, an organic relationship or something that can, I guess, sprout out of meeting someone in person, I think is obviously ideal. I mean, for me personally, I'm much more old school than that, I guess, is kind of looking at someone, getting to know them, getting a sense of who they are and what their values and their beliefs are, and obviously seeing that connection there. The online world it removes a lot of those that sensory type of stuff, and it kind of replaces it with something like you said. It's a distortion of self. And I feel like obviously just everything online at the moment, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or whatever, is kind of has that same sort of negative attributes of it. But it's certainly been an interesting experience so far. So much so at the moment, I feel like I've just got to maybe take a step back and regroup for a little bit, because it's just it's been wild. Looking at some of these profiles, I don't know how to explain it. I don't want to sound like it's really bad, and I know that a lot of guys would be the same. But it's just it's a new and an interesting world for me. So I'm kind of learning it as we go. So,
No, I hear you, man. I hear you, bro. I get it. It's challenging. It's challenging. Yes.
totally. All right, man. I would love for people to reach out to you. Obviously, connect with you via how I did via Instagram and Facebook. But if people want to know more about your work and how you can help them, where would they both go and see you?
Yeah, so Instagram at Stefanos Sifandos, my website, stefanosifandos.com. And I have a book being released in May as well, so I can, I can provide you with those details and you can include it. But I'm really excited about that book. It really covers a lot of what we've spoken to here about intimacy and relationships and sacred sexuality and healing the past, so you can just have an epic life, particularly in intimacy and relationships. So I'm super excited about that.
Awesome. Yeah, please send through the details. Steph, I really want to thank you for your time, for your insight. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope to have another one again soon.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. And likewise.
All right. Take care, my friend.
See you, brother.
Bye now.